Welcome everyone to another performance clinic extending Dynatrace custom plugins and SNMP monitoring. So today I have Brayden Neale with me. Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning, Andy.
Thank you. I know you are sitting in Down Under. I am in just the opposite. I'm in London. I guess we are half a world apart, half a planet
Yeah,
apart.
basically. Yes.
But thank you so much for joining. And I know I said this before we hit the record button. I stumbled across some of your work that you've done over the last couple of months when extending Dynatrace with custom plugins, especially SNMP. That's a big topic. And so I thought these topics come up all the time when I talk with customers. So how can we extend Dynatrace? How can we get more data into Dynatrace that Dynatrace doesn't pick up automatically? And then I wanted to invite you because you obviously have hands-on experience on doing this. You wrote a plugin, so you can share your experiences. So that's why thank you so much for being on today's call.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Before I kick it over to you, for those people that just joined live, use the question feature in GoToWebinar. For those people that watch offline later on YouTube or Dynatrace University, if you have any questions, reach out to the two of us. I mean, he's obviously the expert, as you can see here. There's also going to be an extensions team that you can reach out to. Plus, if you have questions that are in any type of nature for Dynatrace, you can also go to answers.dynatrace.com. That's our discussion forum where all the Dynatrace experts kind of mingle around and answer questions, okay? Having that said, Brayden, I will kick it over to you. I'll cut my video stream because
All right.
not necessary for me to show my face all the time. And blow us away.
All right, no worries. Thank you. So yeah, I'll just cut my video stream as well, just to make sure we get more room to see the slides.
I think you just cut the screen sharing. I think you should
That's the
probably
one. Yeah, that's the
the other
one.
button.
Thanks, Andy. All right. Yeah, so Andy reached out to me because I've done a lot of work around custom extension development and actually extending Dynatrace. So I wanted to talk more from a consumer point of view. So there's been a few presentations like this from the extensions teams themselves, but I want to show you, as someone who's constantly out at a customer site and interacting with the product, how we can bring in additional data points and kind of consolidate some of the monitoring you may already have, or maybe wanting to bring into Dynatrace. Cool. Yeah, so let's get into extending Dynatrace with custom plugins and specifically SNMP monitoring. So brief introduction. So we're going to be talking about what are custom metrics, what are custom devices, how they fit into the Dynatrace landscape. A brief introduction into custom extension development. So we have a lot of documentation around this, some other webinars. But yeah, I'll be diving through what makes up a custom extension, how you can deploy them, how you can build them. And then finally, basically the demonstration on an extension I built, and how we can combine this extension framework with the SNMP protocol, so the simple network management protocol, which you may be familiar with, in order to use Dynatrace to monitor essentially any appliance or any device within your data center. Cool. So custom metrics and devices in Dynatrace. So the Dynatrace OneAgent technology and our monitoring offering is amazing for things we instrument. So as you may have experienced, you drop the OneAgent on your host. It will auto detect the processes that run. It will inject into those processes, and suddenly you have an end-to-end trace of your applications, all the way from the user accessing your web page down to database statements, even mainframe. But we found that there's some network appliances that are crucial to data centers, so things like switches, routers, firewalls, that aren't basically in this. They're not in this flow because they're out of sequence, or they're not directly addressed in these connections. So we're finding we had issues on sites where a firewall would have an outage, or suddenly a switch would be throttling, and then that would be the root cause of our application outage. So Dynatrace have our extension framework and various APIs that we can use to monitor these appliances. So things like F5, switches, routers, firewalls. There's the API which you can start with, which is used to create custom devices and push metrics to them. And then we have SDKs that have wrapped that with ActiveGate plugins, which lets you monitor any appliance that expose a network interface or expose an endpoint, and OneAgent plugins where if you already have a OneAgent on your host, you can use an inbuilt monitoring there to kind of improve the monitoring that provides or gain additional use cases or metrics. It's worth noting that custom metrics are another license component in Dynatrace. That said, if you're using Dynatrace, you do have custom metrics available. So I think the licensing on this, and let me know if it's changed, Andy, but everyone gets 100 custom metrics, and then there's 10 per host unit. So for example,
I probably good question. So I think the details are probably also in the documentation and how that is what the exact numbers are. And I think I think the documentation probably has the right information.
Yeah, it's well documented online. And you can view your custom metrics from your account settings if you're a SaaS customer, or from the CMC or the cluster management console in Dynatrace Managed. And it's worth noting that each metric dimension consumes an additional license. So if you have, looking at say CPU utilization, that's going to be broken down say per core. So core 1 is one metric, core 2 is another metric. And this is explained really well in our documentation. Cool. We have an official Dynatrace extensions team. So we have a dedicated team who are constantly developing and supporting platform extensions in Dynatrace. There are several core offerings that are already GA. So these are things like F5, Data Power, legacy Windows servers, NetScaler, IBM MQ, and then a few in preview, such as Juniper, Citrix, SAP ABAP, SAP GUI. So these extensions are really good. They're really in depth, and they will bring about a lot of metrics for these critical devices that you need. Another thing to point out is that you can reach out to the extensions team and you can engage them with, say, flex points to actually do this development work for you. So if you have something that you're desperately needing additional metrics for, additional monitoring of, you can reach out to Mike and his team and engage them with those requirements to get them to help you. Cool. So the data gathered by plugins and metrics in Dynatrace, so they're actually like first-class citizens of Dynatrace. So if your OneAgent detects a service, and that's an outgoing call to something that we don't have an agent on or something that is not monitored, but if we see that at a service level and you create a custom device with, say, an ActiveGate plugin, Dynatrace is actually able to stitch those together and is able to understand that this custom device is responsible or contributes to this service that you're monitoring. And what that means is that then this is then seen and baselined by the API. So Davis will detect root cause in plugin metrics without thresholds. So on this screen, we're showing an example of the Elasticsearch plugin. But basically a problem on the service level. So we've seen calls going out to Elasticsearch that have started failing. Davis has picked up on this, and it's used those deployment events and those custom metrics to tie that all together. So it's really great in that aspect that it's not just like a bolt-on afterthought. It's a core component of Dynatrace. It feeds into the AI just as anything else. Cool. So with that bit of theory out of the way as to what custom extensions are in Dynatrace and what the custom metrics actually are, we'll get into how you can develop custom extensions and how you can use these to improve this monitoring. So the very first way that a lot of people start out with, because you may have existing workflows feeding custom tools or feeding existing monitoring solutions, you can basically take if you're a sysadmin, your existing Perl scripts or your cron jobs, etc., and you can push those metrics straight to the Dynatrace API. So this is very powerful. It's very flexible, but we're finding it can be like a little difficult to maintain, depending on how familiar you are or depending on what the team's capability are. But it's really just we have two endpoints. So the first is to register the metrics through Dynatrace, and that's just a put method to this time series here, and then you routinely post your data to these metrics to this endpoint that you've set up through the custom device. So I won't go into too much depth on API. This is going to be more about ActiveGate extensions. So with that API, Dynatrace released a plugin SDK that actually wraps around it. And this means it provides a simple Python framework for posting custom metrics to your Dynatrace server. You can download this SDK from your tenant and install with Python pip. The two types of plugins, as I mentioned before, OneAgent plugin, so it runs every minute via the plugin agent on the OneAgent itself. And you use this to correlate data points with something that's already monitored or with a process you're wanting to gain additional insights into. An example of this might be legacy Microsoft Direct Access, where you're wanting to report user connections and things like that. And then the other one, which I'll be diving into, is the ActiveGate plugin framework. This runs every minute from the remote plugin module on an ActiveGate. Familiar with ActiveGates, so they're basically the Dynatrace proxy server component. So you have your OneAgent, you have your Dynatrace server, and you can deploy an ActiveGate in the middle of your data center or wherever you want it really to kind of bundle that agent traffic to make it more secure. And now they have the additional capability of being able to run plugins into poll devices. And this allows you to remotely monitor anything that you can't instrument or basically anything that listens on a network. A little thing to note is that you use Python 3.6 64-bit as that's what our JVM that gets bundled in is built on.
Brayden, can I quickly ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So if you go back, there would be one slide. Yeah, exactly. First of all, also a reminder for folks that are online, you can always ask questions through the question feature in GoToWebinar. So the question that actually just came in, and just to clarify, basically the difference here is if you are in control of a machine, if you can install a OneAgent on a host, but you want to get additional insights into certain things that run on the host that are not, let's say, picked up in all the detail you want by the OneAgent automatically, you would write a plugin that runs within the OneAgent itself on the host, right?
Yes, yeah.
I think the example that you brought, let's say a legacy Microsoft application or something else that provides some way for the local agent to access that data, right? I could probably imagine I don't know, what a WMI or some local calls or some way to pull out that data, and then Dynatrace can directly correlate it with the process and the host itself. And
exactly.
And the ActiveGate plugin, this would be something where you want to monitor a component or a device in your infrastructure where you cannot install a OneAgent on, whether it is a hardware device, whether it is, a load balancer, I think is a good example. Then you would basically use the ActiveGate plugin technology, which is then kind of able to remotely pull data from certain devices that expose obviously the data through a certain API.
Yeah,
awesome.
So if you can install the OneAgent, that's the better plugin framework. And if you can't, and it's a network device, then that's where the ActiveGate plugin really shines.
And the next question that just comes in, sorry for that, but I think it just fits in.
Cool.
For the OneAgent plugin, it makes sense. Dynatrace knows the dependency map of the host and the processes. What about the ActiveGate plugin? Is there an option when we monitor a new device like a load balancer to still fit that into the Smartscape model so that the AI works?
So the ActiveGate plugin registers a custom device and a custom group, and this will fit into the Smartscape. It'll match on IP and port. So if you're seeing calls out to a specific, so if you're a OneAgent instrumenting, say your app server is seeing calls out to a particular IP address and port, that'll be mapped to like a custom device that you're monitoring. So the Smartscape will build up that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So if we move on now, the SDK comes with two utilities. So these are included when you install. The first one is called OneAgent Sim, and all it does is simulate running your plugin. So you basically have a properties file that defines what you want to send it. You run OneAgent Sim, and it's just great for saying, cool, this plugin's going to run. Here are what it would return. Otherwise, great for debugging. Otherwise, it'll tell you whether you're reporting back the right thing, whether it's breaking, things like that. Once you've written your code, you've simulated it, it's all good, you can then use OneAgent build plugin, and this what packages it all together. It pulls in all your dependencies and it puts it into a zip archive. And you use that zip archive to distribute it, to share it, etc. Yeah, so I'll explain and kind of show these utilities a bit later in the hands-on section, but that's a brief overview of both of those. Cool. So the ActiveGate plugin architecture looks a lot like this, or looks like this. So you have your environment ActiveGate, which a lot of accounts or a lot of customers already have these for that OneAgent traffic consolidation and that proxying. But within environment ActiveGates, and it's by default in the newest of the installs, is what's called the ActiveGate plugin module or the remote plugin module. And that contains a Python VM, which every 1 minute will run each of your ActiveGate plugins. So every minute your plugin will be invoked, it will go out, it will poll an API, or it will send SNMP to something. It will then send that back to the ActiveGate, and it will then send that to the Dynatrace server. So this is handled and scheduled for you. Basically, you just say, I want to use this extension on this endpoint, and the ActiveGate remote plugin module will take care of that. We'll send that data to Dynatrace. Okay, so if we get into a bit of how to write a plugin and how does this actually all come together. So every plugin has 2 files. So every plugin has JSON describing what it is. So what the name is, what version, any dependencies it requires. This is what also registers the metrics. So you want to, in this file, you want to list out each metric you have and so a key for that, a display name for that, and the unit, whether that's a percentage, whether it's a simple count, whether it's number of bytes. You can then, so Dynatrace has a technologies overview page. So by default, even custom devices have a nice out-of-the-box UI to view them. But you can customize this and customize how the metrics are shown in the UI section of the properties.json or plugin.json. You can also set up properties that you want to send to this plugin. So properties might be, say, the IP address of the device I'm polling. It might be like user credentials or any security data, things like that. And then you can define how that looks and how a user interacts with that in the config UI. So it's nicely handled from the Dynatrace settings. So there's a nice UI for adding endpoints, adding separate devices, and there's also an API endpoint to do it in bulk if you need to. So with that JSON defining what the plugin looks like, there's then Python code. And this is the simplest example for that I could think of. So you basically import our Ruxit package. So this will be available when you install that SDK I mentioned. But you just say class my plugin. It extends our ActiveGate plugin class. You define what's called a query function. So this is the function that runs every minute from the ActiveGate. And then each plugin just follows these steps. So it reads in whatever configuration you want to send it, and however you want to make use of that. It creates the entities in Dynatrace. So that's nicely wrapped around so Dynatrace has nicely provided the methods for you to be able to do that. So that's just where you create the group with this topology builder create group, give it an ID and a name. You create the device as part of that group. Same thing with a device ID and a device name. You then, this is generally your custom bit. So you say, how do I get my metrics? Define them, build them up. And then it's just a case of send those metrics to Dynatrace. You can send them absolute, meaning it's a standalone value. So we polled at this time, we got value X. We polled at this time, we got value Y. Or you can send relative, so something like a counter, where you care about the difference between the last time we polled and this time we polled. You can then send things like properties. So maybe you pull out what type of device it is, what the device name is, what the uptime is, send that to Dynatrace. And you can also send events. So you can set up thresholds in your plugin that says if this metric goes above this, then immediately raise a problem. So you can use this for the proactive alerting that you're used to with Dynatrace and monitoring workflows.
Hey,
And
Brayden, because you just mentioned something there, and the question just came in on that similar topic with the custom alerts and the thresholds. Joe asked how the AI works with ActiveGate plugins and whether it baselines to and how it works. And the way I explained it is, I think is something that you mentioned earlier. If the AI detects a problem on an application or service, just as we do right now, then the AI walks through the complete dependency tree, including your custom devices, and looks at all the metrics to figure out if any of the metric is showing an abnormal behavior and is therefore considered to be part of the root cause. So that's one part. The other part is where you can specify custom thresholds, as you just said, for your custom metrics that you want to be alerted on. Baselining, as far as I know, and I think we discussed this earlier, baselining for custom metrics is currently on the research. So that's something that the team is also working on. That you can also you will be able in the future. That's the plan to have custom baselines for custom metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Cool. So once you've defined how your plugin works and what it does, you then build it with that OneAgent build utility, and then it's uploaded to both the Dynatrace server and the ActiveGate or ActiveGates you want to run it from. And that's just a simple case of copying the zip package to a specific folder, so the remote plugin module deployment folder on your ActiveGate, and uploading to your Dynatrace environment under settings, monitored technologies, custom plugins. So I'll show this obviously when we do the hands-on part. And then because we've defined some properties and we've defined an interface for users to use our plugin, you can add devices through a UI. So in the case of SNMP, it looks like this. You might have used the F5 extension from our team or the data power extension. In which case, yeah, it's a nice user form. You fill out the fields, you say add, you say update, and it'll actually go out and schedule it and poll it for you. You can also use the Dynatrace API if you have a spreadsheet somewhere or you want to import this in bulk. You don't want someone to obviously run through this with tens or hundreds of devices. You can add custom devices through the Dynatrace API as well. Cool, so now that we know a little bit about how custom metrics work in Dynatrace and how we can write them, I want to talk about the SNMP, or the Simple Network Management Protocol, and how I've used that on site here to actually monitor devices or to improve the Dynatrace monitoring and the Dynatrace footprint at some of the government accounts in Australia. So SNMP is a simple protocol for collecting and organizing information. It's a really old protocol now, but it's getting a lot of popularity again in the IoT space because it is so lightweight and because it's embedded into most devices. So many vendors support these by default. Basically, managed devices run what's called the SNMP agent, and this is what is used to collect and translate that information. They expose any data they've collected as essentially variables that are mapped to object identifiers or OIDs. And these OIDs are grouped together in hierarchies called management information bases, or MIBs. So each MIB will have its name or have the variables it supports. Vendors have their own, but there are also some standard MIBs that if your device is listening on, say, the SNMV2 standard, then it should support some of the MIBs, such as host resource MIB, to report things like CPU, memory, disk usage, IF MIB for interface and network statistics, and then even say SNMP v2 MIB for properties and for like device name, device uptime, and things like that. So you can get very nice generic monitoring of a broad range of things, or if you have a specific device or a specific vendor, you can track down those MIBs themselves and basically report any kind of detail that you would need to or that you would want to. So you can use resources, and there's a lot of documentation out there. You could probably reach out to the vendors, but you can go to sites such as netsnmp.org, and walk through what each of these OID variables are. So for example, if we look at host resource mib, we can see there's a variable called HR storage type, and it's the type of the storage represented. There's things like what's the size of this, how much is used. So obviously, if you do a bit of maths between those, you can get what's the utilization of this disk, or what's the utilization of this memory pool. As well as there's usually names and descriptors for things to make that a bit more friendly and a bit more consumable. Another site I found that's really nice to use is called OID View, and that basically lays it out in this tabular format. So in this case, we're looking at interface MIB or IF MIB, and it's showing under our MIB object identifier, here's one of the tables, and for each entry in this table, you can use these endpoints or these OIDs. So you send SNMP requesting this variable or requesting this OID, and it will return you, in this case, maybe it's the IF index you're interested in, or it's the number of discarded packets, or the number of errors, etc. So basically use Google. Feel free to explore a lot of that if you're wanting to enhance some of the framework that I've set up with the SNMP monitoring. But I'll talk about how I've kind of packaged this together and how Dynatrace can be used to monitor SNMP automatically through the ActiveGate. So a bit of background as to why this extension came about and to why it exists. So I was at a large government customer, and I mentioned before that, so they have a large Dynatrace footprint, and it's been great for understanding the applications, how they all fit together. The AI is automatically raising problems and seeing users that come in and how they're impacted. But we're finding that a lot of this analysis was leading to things like firewall outages as the root cause, or we had links breaking, or traffic was throttling on a switch. So the customer basically came to us and they said, look, we want to be able to monitor everything. I think everything was the word used as well, so it was a bit crazy at the time. They also had a lot of legacy tools and a lot of custom monitoring that they wanted to consolidate into like a few core tools, Dynatrace being one of those. So we worked with the technical lead on site, and one of the other guardians on site, Vu, actually started this out as an extension that posted through the Dynatrace API. So it was a custom Python script that gathered metrics. It used memcached to manage states. It was very complicated, but it would then build up a custom device, post it through the Dynatrace API, and then cron or scheduled tasks would run to make sure that this runs every minute or every 5 minutes, etc. This worked, but we found it was very difficult to extend or to add additional monitoring to, and obviously you needed access to the server, you needed to SSH in, you needed to set up a cron job, you needed to rewrite a lot of the code if you were adding a new device, etc. And then Dynatrace launched the ActiveGate extension. And all of a sudden you could manage these from the Dynatrace server. It had a simple UI. So I took Vu's code and I basically rewrote it into an ActiveGate extension. And so I've tried to make it as generic and extendable as possible so that you can take what's there and you can adapt it for a vendor specific device, or you can adapt it for whichever way you want to. Another thing that's important to note is this is a development project that I've been undertaking. So it's not supported by Dynatrace, it's not supported by any particular third party. But yeah, if you run into any issues, feel free to let me know on GitHub. I just wanted to point that bit out.
And I think, Brayden, also in this respect, because there's a lot of questions now coming in around the capabilities of your SNMP plugin, whether it supports, for instance, SNMP v2 and v3, whether how you can specify your individual SNMP metrics. So I already pointed them out to the link. Actually, and I think in the next slide you have the link anyway.
Yeah, it's in the next slide, and I'm going to walk through it a little bit. I've tried to document things well on the GitHub README, but yeah, if there's anything I missed or any clarifications, ask away.
Yeah, I
let me
just
know.
wanted to highlight one more thing and kind of to echo what you just said. This is a great project from you that shows the capabilities of the Dynatrace extension options. And while it is not officially supported by Dynatrace because it's a project that you drive, I think there's multiple
Yep.
options still. Take it, take what you have, and obviously work with you for either extending it or in case there's any issues that people have. But then we have an extension team that can actually
Yeah.
provide you also support for building custom extensions and then obviously supporting it as well.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning. So if you use, say, my extension to monitor an F5 in your environment, you'll pull back basic information such as CPU, memory, disk, maybe some network traffic. If you use the Dynatrace F5 extension, you're suddenly getting application context such as what's happening with each of your VIPs, what's happening with your VIPs, your pools, things like that. So it's a lot more powerful, and it's a lot more from that end application monitoring perspective,
Mm-hmm.
rather than
And
just
then,
some simple metrics as to whether it's up, whether it's running.
yeah, and then there's two more things I want to quickly highlight.
Yep.
People are asking what other plugins are out there. I know you have it in the slides later on in the resource links, but there is a
Yep.
marketplace page on the website. So on the dynatrace.com website, you'll find a marketplace with a list of Dynatrace extensions, different partners that build different types of extensions, including these OneAgent plugins. And I think you have the link later on anyway.
Yeah, I
And
think it's in the
Mhm.
it's in the resources.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it later on, but one question that Frank has been pointing out or asking, what about SNMP traps? Is there any support for SNMP traps as well, or is this just wanted to highlight and
Yeah,
throw it
so
out?
I haven't done anything with receiving traps. So this is Dynatrace ActiveGate's polling. Yeah, so nothing for traps at this stage. Cool. So that's probably a good chance to actually move into and look at the code a little bit and look at how it works and how it looks in Dynatrace. So because this is an extension from me, I have it hosted in my personal GitHub. So you can view that at, say, github.com, Brayden Neale, Dynatrace SNMP. I've tried to be as descriptive as possible in the README, but if there are anything that doesn't make sense or any clarifications, let me know. But basically, I'm just pulling out some basic statistics. So we're pulling out CPU, memory, disk, and then basically incoming, outgoing network stats, basically from host resource MIB and IF MIB, as well as some default properties such as the system description, uptime, etc. So usage. So I will actually jump into Dynatrace to go through this part. So from your Dynatrace tenant, if you have, actually very first thing, I guess, if you want access to this extension or you want to test using it, if you just head over to releases under GitHub, you can find this zip has been built and packaged here. At the moment, this only works on Linux ActiveGates. I haven't really looked into the crypto libraries on the Windows side. But yeah, so with this zip, so if you download this, and I'll show you where to put it on ActiveGate in a minute, but you can upload this to your Dynatrace server. If you just go in the left-hand menu here, and if you go to settings, and then basically from the main settings page, so settings, monitored technologies, there's a custom plugins tab. And this is where you can see ones that maybe are already running, but you can say upload plugin just here, and then basically you navigate to that zip package. You can also download the SDK from here. So if you say add new technology plugin, add ActiveGate plugin, this is where you actually download the Dynatrace SDK. So it's just a case of, I think it's a wheel file for pip. So you just download the plugin SDK and you say pip install Dynatrace SDK. And then this guide, if it's the one I'm thinking of, is really great. There's actually Dynatrace Go and walk you through building simple plugins, and we have the reference for all the methods and the calls. But once that's uploaded to, say, the Dynatrace server and to the ActiveGate, you have the screen that you defined in your properties.json or your plugin.json file. So we'll have, here's SNMP based plugin. It's an ActiveGate plugin. This is the current version. Here's basically an endpoint I prepared earlier, just hitting a demo environment. But this is where we say, well, here's my endpoint name. What's the type of device? In this case, it's just a Linux server. What's the host name, IP, and possibly a port if it's not the default 161? What version? So at the moment, I support version 2C and version 3 from a user like USM, not so much TSM. I haven't looked into that side of things. But if it's version 2, then you just have your community string or your community name. If it's version 3, then you say, is the auth SHA, is priv, so the auth protocol SHA, MD5, is the priv protocol AES, DES, and then the keys for those, it works with auth priv, no auth priv, etc. Name of a group, so if you're monitoring various devices in a data center, so say in your gateway environment, you're wanting to group all your switches together, or it's the network appliances for this specific app, you can do it in that way. And then you can choose which ActiveGate to run it from. So in this case, it's just my Ubuntu one. So you just say add that endpoint. It will say whether the status is okay. If we add an endpoint that isn't valid, for example, you basically get some feedback information saying like, oh, we couldn't connect, or there was issues with this. And Dynatrace will actually say it'll try to connect out. It'll say possibly that the user wasn't recognized, or we couldn't find this device name, or this property isn't defined or isn't supported. In this case, saying authorization error. In this case, we couldn't connect to this device. No one had any idea how to find this host name. So a lot of the error reporting you can see here. But with that monitoring set up, you can view it under this monitored process. So it'll link automatically to here. And this is just looking at the technology overview in Dynatrace. So at the moment, everything gets grouped under one SNMP. So this is where your group you set up in your endpoint comes into place. This is where we'd have, say, like, here are all the Linux servers in our demo environment. Or we could say, here are all the switches in gateway, or here are all the switches in internal. So everything's going to come under SNMP, but then you can break out really with as much granularity as you want under this grouping. So you can see then basically the averages or the sums when this is grouped together, but you can then drill down into the group and look at the individual devices themselves. So for example, if we want to look at our Linux server we're polling here, this is where, so technologies, Linux demo, so that's the group that we've put this in, and then this is the device we've set. So we've taken the device name and then just the endpoint. And we can view that in the Smartscape. It's not going to be too interesting here because this is just a demo tenant I have. It's just a standalone device. You can push problem events to it. You can push deployment events, etc. But here are some properties we are picking up from SNMP v2. So this is the IP we've given it. This is the IP address. I've just been tracking how many custom metrics just so I can see or kind of keep track of like how many each kind of device type is expected to use, or whether you have a particular device that's like consuming more than you're really wanting to. SNMP, you can set things such as the system contact, so who's the owner for this, or the description, what type of device it is, where it's located, the name, when it was last changed, object ID, so this is basically an internal ID that will say what type of device this is, or even this will break down into like what vendor supports this device, how many services, and then uptime, as well as the metrics themselves, right? So we get CPU utilization, memory, disk, and network. So incoming traffic, outgoing traffic, and that's broken down per CPU index, or per disk mount point, or per memory, like memory buffer or memory pool. So whether that's physical memory, virtual memory, as well as network, it's looking at each of the interfaces. So network, interface, ETH0, L0, etc. Obviously on switches, you can have hundreds of these. So this data is really great, and this is an out-of-the-box view. So I've done a little bit to set up how this looks in the plugin.json. But we can take these metrics and we can extract them from the Dynatrace API, or we can create our own business dashboards to say, well, let's look at the SNMP overview of my environment, or let's look at SNMP overview of this device. So disk utilization, export's getting a little bit full, memory's pretty flat. We can make sure our traffic's not throttling, etc. We can build up more advanced dashboards saying like, here is our CPU over the past 2 hours, our memory, disk utilization, etc. So to look at these or to build dashboards with these sort of metrics, it's the same as any other custom chart you've worked with before. So you can say create a custom chart, add metric. So category, this really depends on how you define it. So mine come in under custom, but you can also just search for under metrics. I want to look at SNMP, CPU utilization, maybe average, or as an area chart, obviously average, minimum, maximum. I want to break that out per index or per CPU core, or I want to just average it across each one. So that's what that'll look like. And then obviously which custom device do I want to look at, or do I want to look at multiple on the same chart? One thing I actually noticed when I was kind of building out this dashboard for this presentation, but Dynatrace have improved what we do for these custom charts. So this was really cool because it was something I thought I would have to write, but Dynatrace can now say, so if we're looking at the incoming traffic, so this is looking at, say, the sum of incoming traffic to our server or to our switch, but we can actually say, well, what is the rate per second? Maybe you have like a 3 gigabit per second limit on a switch or something, and Dynatrace will actually say, like, how is that data? And this is great. So I haven't had to configure this or set this in any way. I've basically just been sending Dynatrace like, hey, here's my counter at this time, here's my counter at this time. It's doing all the state management and seeing how that all fits together.
I just learned something new
Yeah,
too.
so that's, it was really great to see because I had that, someone asked me that on site actually. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll look into doing it. So yeah, that's how you can consume something that's been written, and any extensions or any ActiveGate extensions the same. You can even see the supported directly by Dynatrace ones built into the product under this tab. So things like the Elasticsearch Monitor or Elasticsearch Cloud. If we now get into a bit more technical, so if I basically open up a prompt for my ActiveGate here, hopefully let me know if I'll zoom in if that's a bit hard to see. Hopefully that's a bit better. Yeah, so basically I've cloned my code onto my ActiveGate here. A really great utility is called SNMP walk. So you can say, for example, SNMP walk to my endpoint. You can use v3 or v2. So in this case, SNMP walk to demo.snmplabs.com. You can poll for a specific endpoint or for a specific variable to make sure it's supported. Otherwise, you can just walk basically anything that the device returns. So that's what that looks like. With the code, I've wrapped a lot of the plugin around just a custom like Python test.py. So if we run like Python test.py, for example, that'll show like a lot of the same things. So what we're actually pulling out, which is fine. There's also OneAgent sim or OneAgent build. So if we look at, say, properties.json, so if I run OneAgent sim, it's just going to read in properties.json here and try to run my plugin against it. So for example, if I just type OneAgent sim, so this will come under your Python binaries when you run pip install. So in my case, because this is just a vagrant virtual machine, just under bin OneAgent sim. But the OneAgent sim will say, cool, you've loaded up your plugin. Here are the properties we've seen. And then if you just let it run for a little while, so I'll leave this for, say, like a minute or so, it will then return saying, like, here are the metrics we polled. So entity ID, here was the value we saw, here was the here is the value at this time, etc., as well as you sent through these properties. So you sent through system uptime. And it'll say, did this run okay, or was there an error? Once you're happy with this, once simulator's running good and all these metrics look great, you can run OneAgent build plugin. And I usually run that, you can run that as sudo or not as sudo, but it can actually, so it'll go through, it'll basically pull down all my dependencies. So I use SNMP, but whatever you've defined, it'll package everything up. And you can actually, this will automatically deploy it to your plugin archive at opt Dynatrace remote plugin module. So that's that directory I talked about before. But it can also automatically send it to your server. In this case, I won't do that. But yeah, so once you have that zip on your ActiveGate, it goes to, so this is the default directory, but it's opt Dynatrace, and then remote plugin module, and then plugin deployment. And basically you just take your zip and you unzip it here. So you'll notice this is like the same code really. And with that running, so with this running, you have your remote plugin module that will every minute basically just hit the endpoints you've set up through your server. So that's a lot of details on how that runs and how that looks from an ActiveGate itself and from a Dynatrace server. This all logs out to your ActiveGate log files, and you can view and edit and understand how that all fits together. But if we look at, say, the code for the SNMP plugin, I've tried to make this as kind of modularized as I could think of to, or as possible. But just like I explained before, it's really composed of two core files. So we have plugin.json, and that's what says, here's the name of our plugin, here is the version. You can say things like, you can get a custom icon if you want to be really pedantic and make sure it always displays a switch, which what I call it when you package. This refers to your Python code, which I've shown before, but what's the class name that this refers to? What are your prereqs? So in this case, SNMP, but whatever other packages that you rely on, that's what automatically gets bundled in and all built together. Activation remote, that just means this is an ActiveGate plugin. And then you define your metrics. So I've said here, metric, I'm sending it to my custom device. Let's have CPU utilization. This is a percentage. We'll give it the display name, SNMP CPU. And because I'm pulling out, say, per core, we'll look at the dimension index. If you leave out dimensions, which is perfectly fine, then obviously we're just looking at CPU across the whole thing. So same thing for, say, memory, disk, traffic. So we can say byte or incoming packets as, say, a count. Really any metric you can think of, but you have to register them within this JSON file. So if, for example, you wanted to adapt this to get a lot of depth out of, say, a printer, for example, you wanted to pull out like how many cartridges you had or how much ink was remaining, you have to register those metrics and define that. So once we've set out our metrics, I'll skip over UI because it's useful, but it can get a bit detailed, and usually people are wanting more it raising problems or custom dashboards. But this is that UI before, where this is where I want to show CPU and incoming traffic as my key metrics, and then just define a little bit about how the charts look. And then, the charts themselves. But then properties. So properties is important. So this is where we define, well, what is the user going to send to us so we know what to poll. In this case, device type. So I want to know whether it's a switch, whether it's a Linux server, etc. Host name, obviously we need that to connect to, what the SNMP version is, things like user, any credentials or any connection things, what groups, and then you can define how that looks and how that's displayed under properties. So you can really get creative in how that form's represented and how the user interacts. And then, so the other side of this is the Python code itself. So just like before, so you can also have an initialize function. This isn't necessary. It makes things maybe look a little bit nicer and maybe some slight min-maxing on performance, but you can really get away with just having, say, query function. But yeah, so custom plugin name extends remote-based plugin, and then query. So we basically read in whatever properties I've set. We try to connect to our device. Just as before, we create the entities in Dynatrace. So we build up and display. We create these groups and device entities in Dynatrace. And then this is the poll metrics side. So this is the custom side of things I've done. And then we can basically say, cool, we have all these metrics, let's send them to Dynatrace. So just as before, we can send absolute metrics through to Dynatrace or relative through to Dynatrace. And then same as before, we can also send through things like properties. So that's how the plugin kind of looks and how it comes together. If we've still got a little bit of time, I can talk a little bit about how you could extend this to support another MIB or to poll for additional metrics from another device.
Yeah, I think
there's
I think there's a couple of questions actually that came in on exactly how to use the plugin. Also, how to. I mean, you've used it obviously with different accounts. How many devices have you actually monitored?
I had this on a slide, but I think I took it out in a revision. So on site, we were polling, I think, about 90 devices we got to. There was still more to hit, but we were polling, so like checkpoint firewalls, switches, routers, printers, even things like we had a VPN service we were polling. So I found majority of things did respond to SNMP. Well, everything responded to SNMP v2, which was good, but majority of things responded to, say, IFMIB or host resource MIB. F5 and Cisco were a little different, or a little bit tricky. Cisco decided it didn't want to respond to host resource, so I did a little bit of work using Cisco process MIB, and then F5 had a little bit of a better breakdown with, say, memory.
So then maybe if you wanna, because you just said how to extend the plugin if somebody has their own MIBs, what's the best approach? Is it just taking your code and then just trying to figure it out themselves? Is it reaching out to you? What's the best approach?
You can reach out to me. I've tried to document this on GitHub. So if I go back to this like README here, basically, where am I? Just down here. So you would create a new class. So under this, so if I'm back in my code here, so under this DTSNMP folder, you could basically take one of these. So if we look at, say, host resource MIB, you could copy this. So class my vendor MIB or my device MIB. Init will always be the same. So I've wrapped the polling connections. So it'll just say, we want a new poller, my device, my authentication. And then you want to define your own poll metrics function. So in this case, polling CPU. And then all you do is you just put in the OIDs you're wanting to hit. So if in the case where I'm collecting CPU, so this is the HR processor load CPU endpoint, or these are the storage endpoints. And then you just say here, so self.poller connect bulk to my array of metrics here, and then return process metrics with your own kind of function that says, well, what do we do with this? So we can say like, with CPU, we want to grab the OIDs, and we want to say, well, value is the first one, and what the name is, what the value is. Same thing for memory. If you don't give it under this process metrics, if you don't give it a processor function, I've basically just got a default one that says just print it out as what we see. So this is taken straight from this one here. This is taken straight from the PySNMP documentation. But all this does is it says for each entry in the variables we're polling, just print out what the name is, what the value is. So you can kind of use that to link in your name, link in your value, and to send that all in.
Cool.
So this is essentially what it would look like with the metrics. So metric 1 would have a dimension, whether it's absolute or relative, so whether it's a counter or standalone, and then what the value is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there's some follow-up questions here, and kind of to also clarify what this is first of all a great use case of the extension mechanism of Dynatrace, showing that you can really monitor any type of external device or data source, right? And you went on and basically created a great plugin for SNMP to monitor key MIPS that are out there, also with clear instructions on how to extend it with custom MIPS. Now the question that just came in to clarify for customers, what's the capability on this? Is this a replacement for other monitoring tools that are SNMP based or pull in data, let's say more generically? From my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, we as Dynatrace, we see ourselves as, we can capture not only this external data as other monitoring tools can do, but I think our core value prop here is that we can feed it into our Smartscape model, which means our root cause detection engine, our AI, can tell you in case one of your custom devices and your custom metrics on these devices are actually causing a problem on your applications and on your services. So with this, we believe we've a new approach of what we do with this data. I'm not that familiar with all the other tools that are out there that can do SNMP monitoring, but strongly I believe we can replace a lot of those tools out there, because we do not only just capture data, but we also put it into a model which allows our AI to detect root cause, right?
Yeah, that's really the big value out of Dynatrace. And that's more so the official extensions, I say, are more kind of the replacements for existing tools you have. So whereas this SNMP one, depending on if you say clone it or make it as powerful as you want, but this default kind of catch-all one I've written is just to say, like, let's get some basic metrics about any arbitrary device. So is it up? What's the CPU? What's the memory? If you're wanting to get down to really the device specific metrics or application metrics that are important, that's where individual extensions come in. Whether that's F5 and you want to look at your VIPs and your pools, or whether it's something like IBM MQ and you want to look at each individual queue, things like that.
Yeah. Can you actually do me a favor then? Can you open up the page for the marketplace? I think that's also very helpful, and I sent the links to some.
See if I can. So marketplace Dynatrace. So marketplace, extend the Dynatrace platform, integrations, extensions, app. So we have a lot of our load testing integrations listed here, as well as things like the official extensions from the team. So Citrix NetScaler, details about it, who to reach out to, IBM iSeries. I know there's a lot of existing IBM customers out there. IBM MQ, I've personally seen this one in use, and it's great. It's very powerful. Juniper Networks, things even like SAP ABAP. So a lot of the time we see, so this one's a particularly good, I find, is that our OneAgent on app servers will see calls out to SAP, and you can extract that as a custom service. So you can say, whenever I see calls from the OneAgent out to this host or out to this IP, mark that as SAP. And so that automatically gets all that AI baselining. The AI will suddenly say SAP's running slow. You can then kind of augment that and improve that with this extension monitoring to actually get an understanding of the SAP ABAP platform itself and the SAP server itself.
Very cool. There's also I answered some questions around, there's not only the plugins that you showed, the ActiveGate plugin, the OneAgent plugin, there's also APIs where you can push data to Dynatrace. I have other performance clinics, so these YouTube videos that you'll find, or that actually talk about how you can use these APIs to push data into Dynatrace. So we have both options, pull and push, just for people to be aware of that. Considering the time, Brayden, would you do me a favor and kind of walk through the resource slides so people know what else is there?
So here were the, how do I get? So here's when it loads, here are a lot of the resources and a lot of the public facing links from this presentation. So yeah, there was the marketplace one we're at. This Dynatrace GitHub link. So this is how because I see myself as more of a consumer of the Dynatrace frameworks than say like someone in our extensions team. So this is what I went through to learn how to leverage this. So basically anyone on a customer side or anyone can learn how to do the same. I found it was really well written, really well documented.
Hey,
Yeah.
for the last question or two, let's turn the video camera on so people actually see we're not just bots, but we actually are real people.
Yep.
So thank you so much, first of all, for doing this. To repeat, this is a great showcase of how we can extend Dynatrace through the ActiveGate plugin extensions. So that means take what you have written, extend it for your own SNMP purposes, or just take it as a great reference implementation for building your own plugins that can monitor essentially anything out there. If you want to have something that is officially supported by Dynatrace, then go to the reach out to the extensions team, right? Yep. Extensions@dynatrace.com is the email, and I'm sure there's other also on the marketplace page you can get in touch with us. But what we wanted to show here is there's a lot of ways you can bring in data to Dynatrace, either pull or push. And the value add is not that Dynatrace is just another monitoring tool that gives you nice graphs, even though the graphs look great in the charts, but it's really about feeding data into the AI so that in case there is a problem with your applications, then our AI walks through the whole dependency tree and understands which metric actually contributed to that problem onto your end users, right? So I think this is the key part. If you have not seen Dynatrace in action, the AI, there's a lot of material out there that actually explains how our Davis AI actually works and why it's so a different approach. Why we have a different approach in actually sending data into the not just sending data, but data with context with the model. Brayden, there's one other thing that people asked. What about monitoring things where we cannot install anything and where we cannot actually pull data from, like Salesforce and other SaaS providers? Here, I sent the link to our SaaS vendor run monitoring. So we have a capability to monitor SaaS-only solutions like Salesforce.com. If folks are going to the website and search for Dynatrace SaaS vendor monitoring, then you will find actually a nice blog post and a video from our colleagues.
Yeah, that's really good for Salesforce, Office 365, anything like that.
Exactly. And if you have any other follow-up questions, folks, please go to answers.dynatrace.com. You know Brayden now. You can reach out to him, and obviously, use the discussion forums and just reach out to a Dynatrace representative as well in your local area. If you do me one more favor, Brayden, the last slide, just a reminder.
So it's this one here.
Yeah, I think actually go to that's just some links on, the video. The recording will be up. That's all going to be happening the next day or two. There's more material out there, but if you do me one more favor and go to the last slide, just as a reminder, we have
the Perform one.
Yeah, exactly. Perform. We have Perform coming up. Perform in Las Vegas is our big event. Earlier this year, we already had the different regional events, but Perform Vegas is the big event, first week of February. We also have a lot of hands-on training days, Monday and Tuesday, where you can actually get hands-on experience, and there are also topics around extending Dynatrace. So make sure to go to performdynatrace.com, check it out, and register. I think that's a great way for you to get to learn more about Dynatrace hands-on and talk with the experts. Hey, Brayden, this is really cool. I got a lot of also positive feedback and comments about how useful this was, the insights.
Yeah, great. Glad I could help.
Yeah, and again, if more questions come in, and I see there's more questions coming in, but considering that we're running out of time, please put them to answers.dynatrace.com. And Brayden, I hope I have you back for another session.
Hopefully sometime in the future. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye-bye.